there are people who barely speak to their parents, not because they lack love or interest, but because their internal experience tells them that emotional disclosure carries risk. This is not petty resentment or adolescent rebellion. It is an adult form of self-preservation learned in childhood, at the moments when the nervous system first understood that honesty could result in shame, criticism, intrusion, emotional instability, or complete lack of response. Such individuals carry an automatic reflex. The less I show, the less I can be hurt. Over time, this becomes not a choice, but a conditioned pattern. The brain learns an association. Contact equals unpredictability. Closeness equals tension. Family dialogue equals boundary violations or emotional inconsistency. In adulthood, emotional distance no longer feels like coldness. It feels like a regulatory strategy that stabilizes the psyche and keeps the body out of threat mode. Psychologically, this pattern is rooted in avoidant attachment, formed when a child's emotional needs were ignored, dismissed, or met with hostility. The child stops expressing fear, sadness, or excitement, not because the emotions disappear, but because emotional expression proved to be ineffective or dangerous. In parallel, they develop emotional suppression, a deliberate down-regulation of emotional expression designed to minimize the risk of psychic injury. If a child repeatedly encounters criticism, punishment for vulnerability, ridicule, manipulation, or emotional coldness, the attachment system undergoes deactivation. The brain learns to shut down the need for support. There is a neurological basis for this adaptation. Reduced activity in the medial prefrontal cortex during emotional expression, heightened amygdala reactivity to perceived threat, and greater reliance on dorsolateral regions associated with cognitive control and rationalization. Many of these family contexts represent what Marsha Linehan called an invalidating environment, a climate in which emotional experience is consistently rejected rather than mirrored. When a child hears you're exaggerating, don't be weak, stop being dramatic, don't embarrass me, the message is, feelings are either dangerous or useless. These systems often coexist with parentification, where a child performs emotional or functional roles meant for an adult, soothing the parent, managing crises, providing stability. In such a system, dependence becomes shameful, and handling everything alone becomes a survival virtue. A person stops communicating not out of hatred, but because the nervous system has learned to anticipate emotional consequences. Even a routine phone call can trigger somatic reactivity, elevated heart rate, diaphragmatic tension, shallow breathing, emotional numbness. This is a form of affective dissociation in which the psyche minimizes feeling in order to maintain safety. But the long-term cost of this adaptation is significant. It creates what could be called a latent attachment deficit. An adult may function socially, achieve professionally, and appear emotionally composed, yet struggle to form deep, emotionally reciprocal bonds. By distancing from their parents, they often distance from the entire template of intimate communication. Expressing needs becomes difficult, and autonomy becomes confused with emotional isolation. This often manifests as hyper-independence. I'll handle everything myself. I don't need anyone, which is less a personality trait and more a defensive maneuver against vulnerability. Many of these individuals live in a state of solitary competence, high functioning, emotionally inaccessible, suspicious of reliance. Control becomes a substitute for trust because control eliminates surprise. They may choose partners who are emotionally avoidant or emotionally chaotic. The familiarity of old dynamics disguised as intimacy. Psychoanalytically, this is a split between the true self and the functional self. The true self contains emotional needs, dependency longings, regression, and sensitivity, all of which require acceptance. The functional self is an adaptation, competent, rational, self-controlled, surgically distant from need. The split is maintained through affect suppression and through an absence of trustworthy relational containers. Philosophically, this could be described as a structural longing for an impossible object. The adult mourns not loss, but absence, the absence of parental responsiveness, emotional containment, psychological oxygen. Carl Jung warned that what remains unconscious reappears as fate. If unintegrated pain remains unspoken, it organizes patterns of choice, distant partners, avoidant cycles, difficulty seeking help, chronic aloneness, rationalization of distress. People who stop speaking to their parents often do not feel intense anger. More often, they feel emotional anesthesia, an implicit boundary signaling unsafe territory. Inside, there may be a prediction. If I allow closeness, I will be devalued again. This is not memory, it is forecasting. The emotional brain operates on prediction. It anticipates threat faster than it recalls context. In adulthood, several characteristic manifestations appear. The person rarely seeks help because dependence induces physiological discomfort. They devalue their own emotions because their internal dialogue was modeled on parental invalidation. They invest heavily in work and competence because performance became the only acceptable identity. They choose rupture over emotional confrontation. They somatize suppressed affect through fatigue, muscular tension, low desire, or detachment. And they may believe they are fine, confusing emotional deactivation with resilience. But deactivation is not resilience. It is a regulatory tactic used by a nervous system that once had no choice. The essential work of healing is not fixing the relationship with parents, but restoring effective integration, the capacity to recognize and tolerate internal states instead of banishing them. Recovery begins with mentalization, the ability to identify one's emotional states and treat them as valid psychological data. From there comes self-compassion, which clinical psychology identifies as one of the most effective antidotes to internalized shame. This is the core of inner child reparenting, offering oneself the emotional responses that were missing. Some individuals will remain at a safe distance from family indefinitely, not as immaturity, but as boundary formation where none existed during development. Others may return to contact, not as supplicants seeking validation, but as adults acknowledging the limits of another adult. The objective is not to repair parents, nor to prove maturity, nor to extract emotional payment. The objective is to stop using emotional isolation as a universal regulatory mechanism. A life built entirely on distance keeps the nervous system in a constant posture of defense. The person who stopped speaking to their parents did not reject love. They rejected threat. With time, however, there is room to reposition the boundary, not to revert to exposure, but to reclaim agency, to stop being a nervous system surviving on silence and become a subject capable of selecting forms of contact. Integration is not the restoration of family. It is the restoration of emotional permeability, the ability to endure feeling, to register pain, to remain in contact without self-erasure. Nietzsche wrote, "We become what we overcome." The child overcame an unsafe emotional environment. the adult can overcome the residue, specifically the belief that safety exists only in silence. You are not obligated to speak if the relationship is destructive, but you are entitled to speak where breath is possible now, not for your parents, but for yourself, not to prove anything, but to return to wholeness. The aim is not to be normal. The aim is to stop living as an emotional survival mechanism and allow yourself to be alive. Thank you very much for watching. If this topic resonated with you or helped you understand yourself a little better, feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're interested in psychology, inner processes, and deeper self-understanding. And if you have ideas or questions for future videos, write them in the comments as well. We'll explore them together.